Dark Souls 1 may be my favorite game of all time. It spawned an entire genre of Souls-like games, which in turn inspired entire subgenres and metallic fruit-themed channels. But why? Why did a relatively small-budget game, a spiritual successor to a Japanese PS3 exclusive, explode onto the scene and change video game development forever? To answer that question, I'm going to make the case for Dark Souls 1 as the greatest game of all time. I will build the foundation for my argument on 5 pillars. In my opinion, these 5 pillars are what sets Dark Souls apart from other fantasy RPGs of the era, and even from games being developed and released today. Each pillar will be presented from the weakest to strongest, in my opinion, so we'll be leaving the best for last. First, some honorable mentions that I wanted to fit but didn't quite slot into the 5-pillar structure. First is the innovative PvP. Straight up, the PvP in this game just is not for me. But the innovation is undeniable. Summons for jolly cooperation, being able to invade other people's worlds and absolutely ruin their day, and firing up the base cannon are all keys to what make Dark Souls so revolutionary at the time. The mere fact that I generally choose to play offline and ignore this huge chunk of the experience, and it is still my favorite game, should give you a pretty good idea of how much this game truly has going for it. The second honorable mention is the interconnected world design. Now this one could have easily been one of the core pillars. However, for one thing, it folds seamlessly into multiple pillars and it will get its flowers there, but I still had to make an honorable mention to explicitly state how much this impacts the experience. That feeling when you've been traversing deeper into the early game, fighting through tough areas and enemies, just to realize you have circled around and stumbled onto a new route back to Firelink Shrine, and you hear that music kick in, realizing you are back home, with a new shortcut. There simply isn't anything else like it in any other games that I have personally experienced. Third and final honorable mention is just a general lack of handholding. Something that I think is really important to the Dark Souls experience is that it's not very video gamey, at least it doesn't feel that way. That's to say, it feels like a realized fantasy world you simply experience through the medium of video games, rather being a contrived video game on top of which a story was built. A lack of obnoxious HUDs and hand-holding tutorials enhances this feeling. You're in this world now. You need to go out there, try, die, try again, and figure it out, and you'll love the game for it. The lack of hand-holding makes the player experience the game in their own way without being spoon-fed the way the game intends the player to experience it. Additionally, especially in the early game, going back to that interconnected world, the lack of hand-holding actually makes the player even more familiar with the early game than in most other games, because you have no choice. You need to be able to know how to get from Firelink Shrine to Undead Burg to the forest to New Londo Ruins. You need to figure that out on your own. There is no fast travel, you have no choice. So by the end of the early game, they are forced to play the game not in the way that the game makers intended necessarily, but in a way that makes sense to them. Pillar number 1, environmental storytelling. Many of you will immediately think of cryptic dialogue, item descriptions, and the deepest lore of why they call him Big Hat Logan. And of course all of that is phenomenal, and again could be its own pillar. But instead I'm going to focus on the actual game environments and how they convey the state of the world and the characters within it. Starting in Undead Burg, we see a crumbling civilization where the dregs of humanity are sent to endlessly wander, undead, waging endless war on each other and against anyone unlucky enough to stumble into that land. Later we're whisked away to Anor Londo, a glowing beacon to the gods' power. Sunlight and massive gothic architecture dominates and makes the player feel small and powerless against it. That is until the illusion is shattered, and we realize that Anor Londo too is a dark and dying place, only falsely propped up by the remaining power of the Dark Sun Gwendolyn. New Londo Ruins, a sunken and destitute land of dark and abyss. The environment here teaches us about the corrupting power of the abyss and the darkness that is meant to overtake the world. All of these things are primarily conveyed through level and world design. The attention to detail and execution of the game's lore and vision are astonishing. All of this is apparent to a new player, whether they actively realize it or not, and the depth of the world offers plenty of fodder to existing fans and lore masters to explore and theorize endlessly. Pillar 2. Meaningful player freedom. A lot of games are open world in a far more significant way than the original Dark Souls. Massively popular games like Skyrim and Breath of the Wild allow players genuine freedom to set off in any direction after a brief tutorial period. Dark Souls 1 may not have that level of freedom, but I would argue it offers more meaningful player freedom in that it allows players to make genuinely, quote-unquote, wrong decisions with real consequences if they so choose. For example, a player in Dark Souls 1 can easily make a build that is downright awful in terms of optimization. Nobody told new players that spreading themselves too thin or leveling up resistance might not make their time in Lordran a cakewalk. And unlike Dark Souls 2 and beyond, there is no way to respec once a character has been built. Those levels are simply gone. Another experience many players have had, myself included, is immediately going from Firelink Shrine to the skeleton area. The game has a reputation for being difficult, so you figure, okay, this is just how it is. The player then has several options on how to progress. First, they could get stronger through grinding and leveling their character. They could simply choose to practice and grind and get better at the game. Or they can realize that this ain't it, chief, and just go in a different direction. Now obviously the third option is the option the game intends, or rather expects you to choose. However, if a player opts for choices 1 and or 2 and makes it through the catacombs as their first area, it is entirely possible that they would have done the following things. Make it to the first bonfire in the catacombs. Pick up a skull lantern from one of the necromancers in the catacombs, or even worse, not pick one up. Make it through the catacombs. Beat Pinwheel. Navigate down the Tomb of the Giants, not realizing that there is somewhat of a way back after Pinwheel, ignoring the game's offer of a homeward bone. Find a bonfire in the Tomb of the Giants and rest there. Continue through the Tomb of the Giants only to make the realization that their progress is stopped by a giant orange wall. They will then need to make it all the way back up the Tomb of the Giants and all the way back up the catacombs just to get back to Firelink Shrine, as they do not yet have the ability to fast travel. Now that is a brutal way to treat a player in an RPG, but I'm going to argue that not only is this fair, but it's a positive game design choice and the mark of true autonomy given to the player. Note how many times along these steps of the game was trying to nudge the player in a certain direction without forcing the player's hand. Skeleton's too hard? Maybe try another area. You beat Pinwheel? The first thing you get is a homeward bone. Finally make it to the Tomb of the Giants a little early? It is pitch-ass black and you can't see. Maybe go another way. The game treats the player with respect, allows for freedom of choice in build, direction, optional bosses, and much more. And the replayability of the game and the real feel of the world is helped by this. Pillar 3. Enemy and boss design. Now we're getting to the good stuff. The best designed worlds in gaming wouldn't mean much in an action RPG if the enemies and bosses were not interesting. In Dark Souls 1, the enemies are not just rank-and-file minions to be ignored. They are genuine threats who act somewhat naturally, particularly for the time, and they feel like a believable extension of this menacing world. Even within the context of a video game, we are giving tactile reasons for the enemies respawning because they are undead, just as you respawn because you are undead. Again, Dark Souls is a piece of art that goes out of its way to justify its mechanics without beating you over the head with any one thing, but I digress. There are entire video essays on both of these topics, so I want to focus on one enemy and one boss in particular to make the case for this being a pillar of strength for the OG Dark Souls. For non-boss enemies, the Black Knights of Gwyn. Black Knights use 4 distinct weapons: the Great Axe, Halberd, Greatsword, and Sword. Each weapon comes with a unique moveset and challenge to the player. Each weapon also has a low chance of dropping, which can immediately impact the playthrough if acquired early on. Just ask speedrunners. They are imposing, strong, and stick out in an appropriate way as being greater than the common rabble enemies of the early game. The stark contrast of their singed, damaged armor compared to the shimmering, glorious aspect of the Silver Knights of Anor Londo gives another layer of complexity to their character. Plus, most importantly, they're cool as shit. For bosses, I didn't want to pick a DLC boss even though they were all excellent, and I thought about picking a less often discussed boss, like for example the Gaping Dragon, or even Sif. But the fact of the matter is, Smo and Ornstein deserve to represent the game in a case for the greatest of all time. The presentation, outrageous. The music, legendary. The setting at the end of Anor Londo, perfect. The challenge, brutal but manageable. The boss design, you already know. If the rest of the game makes you feel like you are a hopeless and helpless undead in a dying world, this fight makes you feel like a champion overcoming defenders of the thrones of the gods. Again, I could talk about the mechanics and movesets, but this is more about the spectacle, the challenge, and the place within the lore of the game. Now there are better bosses both in this game and throughout the rest of the series, all in my opinion of course, but none carry the torch of what a true Dark Souls boss is more ably than Smo and Ornstein. Pillar number 4. combat. A game simply isn't good if it's not fun to play. And goddammit, the original Dark Souls absolutely nails the slow, plotting, impactful combat of medieval knights, monsters, and undead. That first time you face off against a shield-bearing hollow, when you finally best the abyss abomination that is Manus, and everything in between, holds up incredibly well even after newer entries in the series have increased the complexity and options from a mechanical standpoint. The Dark Souls series has frequently been described as being tough but fair. With few exceptions, I strongly agree with this idea, especially in the first game. When I die to most enemies and bosses, I can understand what happened and what I could have done differently. The combat also offers a wide variety of playstyles for such an early entry in the series. Playing with massive strength weapons, fast dexterity weapons, faith-based miracles, or intelligence-based sorceries all feel genuinely different, to the point that subsequent playthroughs almost seem like playing through a different game. Additionally, each weapon class within those categories feels sufficiently unique to tempt players into trying a wide variety of weapons. The now famous stamina management system makes any decision to act or not act carry additional weight. This is not a game that can be aimlessly R1 spammed through like some later entries or other games. Unless of course you're Giant Dad, but we'll not talk about that right now. Instead, you must be aware of your position, your stamina, and your poise to be effective as a fighter. One of the greatest things about the combat is that a great player makes it look easy and a new player will struggle. That is to say, the player truly is in control of the outcome in most cases. Consider the fact that the game has been no-hit by many challenge players, while your little brother would probably get absolutely rocked by the Asylum Demon. Pillar number 5. The emotion it invokes in the player. Everything we've discussed so far are tactile pillars that can be pointed to and quantified, yet they all feed into the final pillar that is the most important yet difficult to define. Dark Souls really makes you feel something when you play, and not just like Spider-Man. It doesn't just make you feel one emotion, like a single note being played over and over. It is a medley of emotions that result from the complexity and depth of the story, design, and game mechanics. The first time my friend played Dark Souls, after listening to how much I loved it, she played for a few minutes, fought the Asylum Demon, died a few times, finally beat the Asylum Demon, and then burst into tears. She told me she didn't want to play anymore because it was simply too much, and I kind of get that. The frustration of the difficulty involved with learning the mechanics and general gameplay of Dark Souls is incredibly real. In fact, I bounced off the game for months until my friend convinced me to try again. When you are lost, searching for the next bonfire, empty Estus flasks, low on health, hopeless and desperate for a bonfire or a shortcut, there is a feeling that there are genuine stakes to the gameplay. There is no quick saving in Dark Souls. In fact, the game won't allow you to load anything at all. What happened has happened. There is no pausing, just like real life, and the players are forced to deal with that. Yet those feelings of hopelessness and isolation lead to some of the highest highs in gaming. Beating that boss and popping off like a banshee at 2 AM is better than anything more forgiving games have to offer. And that doesn't even touch on the peace and melancholy of Firelink Shrine, the emptiness and futility of beating Gwyn, and ultimately realizing that none of your actions truly changed anything. If there is one thing about Dark Souls that stands up, it is the emotions it invokes in the player. And with any great piece of art, I truly believe that is the most important takeaway. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. I'm going to be continuing this series on with other games as well, so subscribe and stick around for that if you would like to be notified. Otherwise, I will be checking the comments if you'd like your favorite game to be featured next.